Did you know? In an early Japanese demo of Resident Evil 4, next door to the shotgun house, there's a framed picture of the Chainsaw Man with his mask off and his back turned. If you walk up and inspect it, the description says, it's the local legend, the Chainsaw Man. No matter how many times you kill him, he keeps coming back. They say he was actually the richest man in the village. In the release version, collecting Chainsaw Man's bottle cap in the shooting gallery reveals his real name is Dr. Salvador. So maybe he's the town doctor, and that's how he got so rich. It's not entirely clear though, because little else is known about the mysterious Chainsaw Man. His photograph could only be seen in the Biohazard 4 Trial Edition demo, but it got cut from later demos as well as the game's final release. There was an even earlier demo that had an item called Mikami's Watch, named after series creator Shinji Mikami, but the demo's been completely lost to time along with any trace of the timekeeper. You won't find an image of it online, a leaked beta build, or even a mention of Mikami's watch on any fan wikis. Just like Chainsaw Man's photo, it appears to have once been hiding somewhere in the village. In an old German magazine we had translated, the game's producer said, "One day, the team made a treasure item called Mikami's Watch to commemorate their director and his boundless love for watches. We even used a dummy watch in this year's demo. However, we will probably remove Mikami's watch from the game. We think Mikami probably doesn't want to let anyone touch his watch." We almost gave up hope finding the watch, but after a few months of searching, we finally hit gold. We talked to a private collector who's in possession of another early demo that's never been made public, who shared this image that could only be found in the debug menu. In Japanese, it says a rather expensive, high-quality mechanical watch. Despite our best efforts, the collector wasn't willing to share the full demo with us for archiving, so it seems Mikami got his wish after all. No one's ever gonna be able to get their hands on that watch of his. Speaking of early RE4 builds, Leon's voice was pretty hilarious.
No!
That Mikami's Watch story came from German magazine Endzone, who got some exclusive interviews throughout 2004. If you've seen recent videos on this channel, you know we like to dig up long-forgotten magazines from around the world and get them translated, which is where a lot of the info in today's video is gonna come from. So let's jump in, starting with an aspect of Resident Evil 4 that often gets overlooked, the game's audio. RE4's chief sound designer was Yoshihiko Wada, a man who takes his job so seriously that he literally named his daughter Cool Sound. According to Wada, the most important sound in the entire game are the gunshots from Leon's first handgun. It is, after all, the first impression the game makes on the player. So he traveled halfway around the world to make sure he got it right. Capcom's sound library wouldn't suffice, and it's illegal to just fire off guns in Japan, so he flew to America to get his hands on some real-life firearms. "I was even able to actually fire some guns in LA, he told Play Magazine. "I think it goes without saying that this experience was very meaningful for me in the sound creation process of this game." In RE4, you'll be firing your handgun over and over throughout the course of the game, and because of that, the sound for firing that gun has to be really cool, really impressive. He also went to great lengths to make Leon's left and right feet emit different sounds. Take note of how in this moment, only his left foot steps on the collapsed wooden fence. Some people may think, is it really necessary to get that detailed? Wada asked, then answered his own question saying, I say yes, of course it is, because everything starts from walking, from footsteps. As for the game's dialogue, most of the enemies speak a Mexican dialect of Spanish. For example, the very first villager swears pretty heavily. We don't want to risk getting demonetized by saying it out loud in English, so here it is with subtitles.
¿Qué carajo estás haciendo aquí? ¡Lárgate, cabrón!
And here's a few more quick translations of memorable moments.
¡Un forastero! ¡Un forastero! ¡Avisad a los demás! ¡Te voy a hacer picadillo! Oh, la campana. Es hora de rezar. Tenemos que irnos.
In a recent Famitsu interview we translated, lead designer Yoshiaki Hirabayashi laughed about how a few of these Spanish phrases went viral in Japan because fans thought they were hearing Japanese phrases like freaking unbelievable and flimsy breast sauce. It was kind of a big deal in Japan, so Hirabayashi promised they'd be back in the 2023 remake, saying, "We understand these kinds of regional jokes are part of the memories all players have of the game, so all those lines from the original will return, plus some new ones made especially for the remake." There were, however, a few lines that got cut from RE4's virtual reality release in 2021. The game was developed by Armature, a Texas studio founded by former Metroid Prime developers. More specifically, some of the game's flirtatious banter got cut. Armature producer Tom Levy said, "It's the year 2022, and some of this stuff doesn't age well, and it doesn't fit with the Resident Evil franchise these days." Here's a few examples of lines in the original that got cut from the VR edition.
I see that the president's equipped his daughter with ballistics, too.
How rude! And I don't believe there's any relevance with my figure and my standing.
So, after you take me back to my place, how about we do some, overtime?
Sorry.
Somehow I knew you'd say that, but it doesn't hurt to ask, you know?
I'm Ingrid Hunnigan. I'll be your support on this mission.
Loud and clear. Somehow I thought you'd be a little older.
Leon, it's been 6 hours since our last transmission. I was starting to get worried.
Don't you mean lonely?
And also, the entire post-credits scene.
I've rescued the subject. We're returning home.
You did it, Leon.
Thanks. You know, you're kind of cute without those glasses. Give me your number when I get back.
May I remind you that you're still on duty.
Story of my life.
There were more than just these examples, but you get the idea. A representative from Facebook who makes the Oculus headset RE4 released on said these updates were made to account for the tastes of modern audiences. The Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes changed up their inventory systems, but RE4's puzzle-style inventory was so beloved by fans, the devs promised it'd return virtually unaltered in the RE4 remake. The original attaché case was so memorable, in fact, that it got converted into its own standalone game in 2022, developed by Brazilian indie studio Fractal Projects. That game is Save Room, a pretty clever play on words. With 40 levels, it's basically just RE4's inventory system, but with some minor twists and puzzle mechanics. We talked to Save Room's designer and programmer, Samuel Ribeiro, who told us when he was a kid, he played RE4 on an old black and white TV, which added to the horror mood. He found that the inventory management was so relaxing and euphoric that when he grew up, he made Save Room as an homage. Apparently, lots of others felt the same way, because user reviews are overwhelmingly positive, and Samuel says in its first year, it's already sold close to 100,000 copies.
1998. I'll never forget it. It was the year when those grisly murders occurred in the Arklay Mountains. 6 years have passed since that horrendous incident.
Resident Evil 4 released in 2005, but the events in-game take place in 2004. That was actually kind of a mistake, the result of a development hell that dragged on for almost 5 years. Capcom wanted it to release and take place at the same time, so programmers were working 12 hours a day, from 9 in the morning till 9 at night. But development still took a lot longer than expected after they built 3 different versions of RE4 that all ended up getting scrapped. The first version's story was Leon investigating Umbrella's European HQ with a special unit who all get killed, leaving Leon as the sole survivor. The second version had Leon infected with a bizarre disease, seeing hallucinations and pursued by a hook man. And the third version had actual zombies, but the devs thought it just wasn't fun. No more zombies, they said, and threw it in the trash so they can make the fourth and final version, the Resident Evil 4 we know today. The reason it ended up so different from all the previous games, with their fixed camera angles, lack of resources, and emphasis on horror, was because Resident Evil 1's GameCube remake sold far below expectations. Series creator Shinji Mikami was heartbroken. Looking back almost a decade later, he said, "The Resident Evil remake is actually one of my favorites of the series too, but it didn't sell very well. I have kind of a lingering trauma there, much more than people would think, so I decided to work more action into Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4 would have been a more scary, horror-focused game if the remake had sold well. That's when the old Resident Evil died, and a new one rose up and came to life. In all the previous games, he said horror was top priority and fun factor came second, but now they were prioritizing fun over horror. Even that final build got a lot cut out of it, largely due to time constraints. According to Mikami, 40% of the castle ended up getting removed, which amounts to 1/6 of the entire game. Also, producer Kawada said that they wanted to flesh out Luis a bit more as a character, which is something they promised to fix in the 2023 remake. We mentioned a few minutes ago that the game takes place in 2004, even though it released in 2005. So what we want to talk about next is what happened to Leon in 2005. He wasn't in the next game and didn't return until RE6, which took place in 2012. So what was he up to during those 8 years? To find out, you would have had to watch a couple CGI movies, Resident Evil Degeneration and Damnation. Most fans never saw them or played the mobile game, and unlike the live-action films, both these movies are 100% canon and managed by the top guys who made RE4, with Kobayashi saying, "After producing Resident Evil 4, I wanted to make a sequel to that story. So I made Degeneration to show what Leon did next. Then I wanted to make another sequel, so then I continued Leon's story with Damnation." Degeneration released between RE4 and 5, and had the same voice actors from the games. It takes place in 2005, and it's actually structured more like a game than a movie, with 2 separate scenarios starring Leon and Claire. It begins with a zombie outbreak in an airport, with Claire's trapped inside and Leon's the special agent sent to defuse the situation and ultimately acquire the T-virus vaccine. The story, of course, involves a pharmaceutical research facility, and the movie's got some tie-ins to series lore and even some Raccoon City flashbacks that fans will enjoy. Honestly, it probably would have worked better as a game than a movie. A zombie-infested airport with the lights out and a bombed-out pharmaceutical lab make for great backdrops, and the movie seems to realize that, as it shows us area maps and divides the story into A and B scenarios. The next movie, Resident Evil Damnation, takes place in 2011. Degeneration was an RE4 continuation as far as the timeline, but it's Damnation that ended up feeling more like the direct sequel. The story's set in Eastern Europe and focuses on Las Plagas. Basically, there's a civil war in the fictional country of Eastern Slav Republic, with both sides using bioorganic weapons to claim victory. While RE4 was mostly set in European villages and castles, Damnation sees the outbreak spilling into the streets of the capital city. So basically, it's like an RE3-style sequel to RE4. Claire's gone and replaced with Ada, who's mostly off on her own in sort of a separate ways scenario.
It's been a long time, Leon.
What are you doing here?
As far as tone, the RE4 cheese is in full force.
Where's everyone going? Bingo?
I keep saying these things make bad pets. This might hurt a little.
In fact, it's maybe even more cheesy, like when Ada gets into a slow-motion knife fight with the Eastern Slav president. Then it happens again later with Leon. Talking to Japanese outlet Gigazine, Kobayashi said gun enthusiasts who worked at Capcom thought it was kinda dumb how Resident Evil 4 takes place in Europe, but Leon finds a bunch of American guns lying around. So in Damnation, they made weapon procurement more realistic, with Leon only using guns he could believably get his hands on in Eastern Europe. Back to the topic of weapons acquisition though, the official player's manual for Resident Evil 4 encouraged fans to buy this chainsaw from ResidentEvilController.com.
Not only will you need cash, but you'll need guts to buy that weapon.
At $50, they were more expensive than a typical gamepad, but the box boasted it had, quote, superior design for improved game-centric play. That wasn't really true though. It actually made playing Resident Evil 4 more difficult. It was a terrible controller, but honestly, pretty cool as a collector's item. Every chainsaw had a unique blood splatter on the blade, and the box it came in was modeled after the house in the Chainsaw Man's village. When RE4 got ported to PS2, they made a chainsaw variant for that console as well. If you go looking for these chainsaws on eBay or Amazon, they're gonna cost you an arm and a leg.
I'll buy it at a high price.
But almost 100,000 were made, so they're not especially rare, and they could still be found pretty close to their original $50 MSRP. What are especially rare, though, are these official Resident Evil 4 GameCubes only released in Europe. Limited edition console and controller decorated with RE4 logos, and only a few thousand were ever made. Collectors would have a hard time getting their hands on one at a reasonable price, especially if it's still sealed.
Not enough cash, stranger.
All the way back in Resident Evil 1, Capcom originally planned to have child zombies roaming the Spencer mansion, but Mikami ended up cutting them because it was disturbing, and he thought people wouldn't like blowing kids' heads off. Later games followed suit and only included adult zombies. It's reasonable that the mansion and police station wouldn't have any kids around, but an entire village without children is a little less believable. So for Resident Evil 4, the missing kids were explained in the lore. After beating the final boss, this game's credits are accompanied by woodcuts showing what happened in the village before Leon's arrival. The woodcuts were later expanded into a 13-page story featured in a book called Biohazard Incubate, which released about 2 years after the game. It's basically Resident Evil 4's prologue. In addition to the missing children, it also fleshes out backstories for the village chief, Sadler's arrival, and the village itself, all presented as journal entries from a villager named Rodrigo. It's Japanese and pretty long, so I'll just read the very beginning and summarize the rest. Rodrigo's first journal entry says, "Within this village are hearts that love children's smiles, kind neighbors, and things of antiquity. It's a modest life full of simple pleasures. The village has maintained peace while preserving its customs and culture. It was here where time flows gently that I was born, and here where I'll return to the earth. I love this village. I hope this beautiful place will last forever, so I decided to paint it from time to time with my brush. I'll write my name in the corner of each painting to tell my grandchildren and their children, who I might never meet, about the beauty of this place." He goes on to say the men and women toil the fields, and the children help with chores, like milking the cows. Most of the villagers are related by blood, so they're like one big family. One holiday afternoon, Rodrigo has lunch at a friend's house, who's proud of his new job as an excavator at the Salazar Castle. There's a story elders often tell their grandchildren about the first lord of the castle who protected the village and drove out the paganists. As for the current lord of the castle, Ramon Salazar, well, Rodrigo's not so sure about this new guy. Harvest arrives and the whole town pitches in to bring in crops, even the children. Children are the treasure of this village, raised on the backs of the villagers, Rodrigo writes. It's everyone's hope that the children grow up happy and healthy. After the harvest is finished, they hold a festival with everyone singing, dancing, reading poems, and playing guitar. The village chief, Mendez, was conspicuously absent from the celebration, but Rodrigo doesn't think too much of it since the chief is also the village priest, and figures he must have church business to attend to. Rodrigo writes about how their quaint little village has survived into modern times, with its people farming the fields, fishing in the creeks, and collecting wild nuts, loading them onto wagons and sharing amongst each other. Then he says the village chief told him to gather the entire village the following Sunday, so he must remember to bring his wife and daughter. At this point, the pages literally get darker as the story takes a turn for the worse. Next Sunday at the church, Sadler gives a sermon. Quoting directly, Rodrigo writes, "After speaking with the village chief, I attended Sadler's sermon. Lord Sadler is a distinguished member of Los Iluminados, a group the village chief holds in high regard. He came a long way to visit us villagers and spent countless hours regaling us with wonderful stories. He taught us that by undergoing a ritual to purify our blood, sinful people like us can save our souls and attain even greater happiness." Then he notes that his friend who works at the castle, who was once so gentle-natured, has started lashing out and becoming aggressive. Perhaps that's the kind of sin they need washed away, Rodrigo ponders, and he's grateful that Sadler's here to protect them. The villagers are told the ritual will connect everyone's hearts and wash away the impure blood. They all line up for their transfusions, except Rodrigo's brother, who's frightened but ultimately gives in. In his next journal entry, Rodrigo says his wife has been coughing up blood. Then, after dinner one night, his daughter starts foaming at the mouth, goes into seizures, then dies. Rodrigo's wife stands there emotionless while he's in complete shock, not wanting to believe what's happening. He runs to his brother's house, who's begun to go insane. Rodrigo writes, "In a matter of days, all the children in the village were dead. My precious children were gone. Not one remained. Not a single one. More adults' eyes have turned crazy, and they've lost their minds. I vomited blood this morning." On the last page, Rodrigo says the chief sent him a message. By order of Lord Sadler, any stranger who arrives in this village must be killed. Great Sadler, I heed your command, Rodrigo vows. Nearby, a villager's head falls off. Presumably, Rodrigo succumbed to a similar fate not long after, and this final journal's the last thing he ever wrote. And that's why there aren't any kids in Resident Evil 4. Sadler's blood ritual killed them all. Okay, and now for probably the most important info in this entire video. Have you ever found yourself playing RE and wondered what you're supposed to be eating and drinking? Believe it or not, there is a correct answer, and Shinji Mikami's got you covered. Diet Coke and potato chips, he said. Lightly salted potato chips. Calbee brand. When you eat the potato chips, you should use chopsticks so your fingers don't get greasy. That's the Resi 4 diet. That's what you're supposed to eat while playing. Straight from the creator. Did you also know one of the puzzles in RE2 Remake has a reference to a cop from Resident Evil Outbreak who managed to escape the police station? If you want to watch our video on RE2, click the video on screen. We'll also have a video for the RE4 Remake someday soon, so subscribe if you don't want to miss it. I'm the Sphere Hunter, and you can find me on YouTube and Twitch talking all about Resident Evil. Special thanks to our translators, Welsh for consultation, and Eurasia_M for footage. And of course, thank you all for watching. I'll see you next time.